All right, welcome in. This is the first episode of Roster Rescue. We are inside of our Discord. If you're not already in here, scan the QR code, patreon.com/all gas, get you in the Discord. And this is going to be a show where we are talking your rosters. It is not going to be a full roster review. If you're interested in a full roster review, you can get it at ddfantasyfootball.com. That's what you see on the screen. They're 40 minutes. We record an in depth review talking through your roster construction, trade potential. Really, you're the input. So you fill out a form, tell us what you want reviewed or what you want talked about, and Shane and I will review it for 40 minutes. So you'll get one of those. If you have any questions, DM me on Discord, leave a comment here on YouTube, QR code for your convenience if you want to get right there. So that's what you see on the screen. But today, the focus of this show is we are going to go through 5 teams from the community. So I apologize for those that did not get selected, but I went through and I randomized 5 different rosters. So I'm going to put them in the chat. We're going to pull up the team. I asked everybody to fill out a basic template with the league format, the number of starters, the number of roster spots, any premiums, and then a summary of your roster. So I've picked these 5 randomly. If you want your roster on here, I will post a thread before I'm about to record an episode and just drop it in there using the format, and you'll be randomly selected. So we're going to go ahead and jump to the first one. This is Remember Jedha's roster, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up here using Dynasty Daddy. We're going to use Dynasty Daddy for the reviews. So we're going to go through. First thing I do when I do a roster review is pull it up here on Dynasty Daddy. And I want to see the specs of the league. So this league is called SWGOFF. I have no clue what that stands for, but we're going to pull it up and we're going to go through the basic format first. So for this team, this is a 12-team start 11. It is 26 roster spots, and it is 3 taxi spots. So we're going to go to his specific team. Here's his specific team. And one cool thing about Dynasty Daddy is you can go down here when you click on this button, Show Settings. Jeremy actually put it in a really cool graph that highlights the starting spots. So you highlight over each one of these, and it'll give you the roster construction, at least the starting lineups, and then I ask for the bench and the taxi, etc. So you can see right here, it's start a quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 3 receivers. Then you go down here, you have the 3 flexes, and then the super flex, and then here's the bench, 15 bench, 3 taxi. So immediately, I know this is a 12-team, start 11, 29-man rosters. I don't count the injured reserve. I'm just looking at how many different players can I roster. So 12 by 29, start 11. Actually, I didn't pick this on purpose, but it's very similar to the roster construction series. You can scroll down here. You can see the scoring. So this is 6 minus 1. He says basically extra premiums. It's 0.75 tight end premium, and then there's yardage bonuses. So you can get down here. You can see the yardage bonuses. See if there's actually any that highlight on here in Dynasty Daddy. No yardage bonuses on here on Dynasty Daddy other than the 0.75 tight end premium. So it's literally, without purposely picking this league, this is literally almost mimicking the roster construction series. And here's what Remember Jedha says about the team. More competitive than I expected in year 1 despite the injuries. Drafted heavily into tight end beast scoring based on the scoring edge, starting 3 to 4 tight ends weekly. With Kittle injured and Hunter drafted, big 2026 plus decisions looming. So we look at the team. The first thing that I look at, and we'll go to the war in here just a second, but the first thing that I look at is where do we maybe have some inefficiencies with this roster? So knowing that it's 175 tight end premium, knowing that it is not a running back premium of any kind, so we're not looking at like a 0.2 point per carry or first down bonuses or anything. Like the first thing that comes to mind to me is we're okay with these tight ends, given that the tight ends fit a certain threshold. And I might as well pull up the war here just to show everybody. So go to here, type in the sleeper username. This is on the ddfantasyfootball.com. Remember Jedha. Now I go to 2026 because that, if your league has been renewed, that's what'll pull it up. But keep it on 2025 war. That's what will pull up this league. So we'll get it to load. Go right here. All right, so it's this one right here. So when you go here, really the one thing I'm going to look at for this is looking at the 3-year average. Now this is going to be total war for the 3 years, But what I'm looking at here is when I was talking about those flex rates, let me get the quarterbacks off the screen here for just a second. What I'm looking at here is just we know that this is a start 1 tight end, start 2 running backs, and a start 3 receiver league. So we already know that if we just talk about the start 3 receivers, that when you're talking the receivers, the receivers in the flexes really don't even start until down here. So let's just take wide receiver 37. Now, it's not going to be exactly like this in your league, but wide receiver 37, this is basically the value where receivers in the flexes start for the season. Okay, so this is not counting on sit-start decisions and how much of these points do I actually capture, but just total WAR for the season, 0.5 for that first flex receiver. So that's really like what you're aiming for, probably somewhere in this range between 0.4, 0.5. That's really what you're aiming for if you're flexing a receiver. So let's add the running backs on here. So we know that running backs basically starts right here. Now we know the nature of running backs. You're probably a little more predictable from week to week, but it's pretty similar, right? You start getting down into these RB3s right after you have to start the top 24. It's pretty similar of a flex rate. Now, if you didn't have the tight end premium, those would be the only options in the flex. Tight ends wouldn't come into play, but here's where the tight ends really come into play. We know you only have to start 1 tight end, so here you go. Right here, that's where the breaking point is. That's where the quote-unquote starters are done at tight end. Now you start getting into the flexes, and you're like, okay, 0.49, 0.51, 0.48, 0.45. Like, all of these tight ends are flexible. You can probably get down to like tight end 18, tight end 20 or so to where you can flex tight ends. And that tells me that, okay, if I go back to his roster, just eye the players that he has. I know George Kittle's injured, but Aronde Gadsden, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, and probably George Kittle, even if he just comes back and he's 70% of what he was, he's good enough where he's probably not falling outside of the top 15. So I look at these tight ends and say, yes, I have 4. Maybe I don't want to carry 4 tight ends. I probably optimally don't want to have 4 tight ends if they're not within that top 20 or so. So I'm looking at these tight ends like these tight ends are fine. There's not excess at tight end. Now, looking at the receivers, you can spot that there's clear excess on here. So this is the thing that you really have to realize. Okay, tight ends are good. I think my roster construction series 4 was the optimal number. Tight end construction here is perfect. I'm not looking to trade any of these tight ends away because I can safely flex all of the ones that I have. So now we're looking at, okay, what's competing with the tight ends for those flex spots? Running backs, okay, we're weak at running back at the top, obviously. We don't even have an RB1. We have maybe an RB2 with Jalen Warren, maybe Aaron Jones, maybe Blake Corum, and then we're just rostering bodies. Literally, this is the weak spot on the team. And so that immediately tells me, because we're not top heavy at running back and we don't have enough placeholders at running back, we have 0 options on this team to flex running backs. So I have one of 2 decisions. I either need to get more of these running backs, which means I have to use those 29 roster spots much more efficiently, or I have to get better ones. And given that we have the 106 in this class, and then we have a couple seconds, a third, and a fourth, we're probably not in a position to add much more than just running back bodies. So what can I trade these seconds for? What can I trade the third for? Like, can I add another Aaron Jones? Can I add another Jalen Warren type? You could do that. This is probably one of those teams that if you can go trade for Ramondre Stevenson or Chuba Hubbard or Kenneth Gainwell or whatever, insert whoever you want, that's probably a good place to use those seconds and thirds and fourths to upgrade. Now, where you also need to upgrade, and here's, I think, the conundrum of this team, is we're starting to set our lineup and we're going, man, CeeDee Lamb, fine. Nico Collins, fine. I don't hate Travis Hunter on a team like this because if you think he's going to be volatile, he just needs to be volatile to where you're just betting on him being a little better than what everybody expects, which means he's in your lineup. You're putting him in. He's one of your flexes. He's competing for one of your flexes. He's not on a team where he's the wide receiver 6 or 7 or 8, but you want to hold on to him for future value by also being weak at running back and being weak at other spots. So I'm fine with Hunter on this team. You could also swap out Hunter for anything if you wanted. If you wanted to move him for just a different receiver. You know, there's a reason we have the Trinity. If you want to shop around to see what else you can get for Hunter, I'm fine doing that. But the real problem with this team is we have some roster cloggers. I mean, I don't agree with Calvin Ridley at a 0. this is actually the perfect type of team to have Calvin Ridley or have Ryan Flournoy or have Jalen Coker because I need them. I probably am going to have to start Calvin Ridley or Jalen Coker, and that's okay. I think that's the big thing people miss with these names is I'm not saying Jalen Coker or Calvin Ridley or Ryan Flournoy are startable in a start 11. But if you have them, you need to be in a range where one of them, at least, you can say, well, sure, I'll just start him, and I'll live with the results. At least I'm going into the year preparing that one of those guys has a good chance of being in my flex. And you may say I need to upgrade, but like this team doesn't have a ton of assets to go and upgrade unless you want to spend one of these firsts. But you definitely got to cut a few of these receivers. You know, you're not strong enough at running back to say I'm going to live with like the stream wide receiver 3 option. Now, you could do that if you had more Jalen Warrens and more Blake Corums and more Aaron Joneses. Quarterbacks are fine. We'll get to that in just a second, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of discussion with this QB room. You just don't have enough roster spots to kind of stream receiver and play the NERB on a 53 because you don't have any top 12, top 15 running backs. And you have a good quarterback room, but you probably have a quarterback room that wants to carry some backups. This isn't a room where you need 8, 10 backups. And I always go down here to see what quarterbacks are available. I mean, in this league, not many backups available, as you can see. Really none. There's 63 quarterbacks rostered already. So this league's probably pretty hip to the any quarterback on a 2 deep, which means it's not a super viable strategy. So I don't mind actually trading for a third quarterback here. And people may think that's crazy, but this is the kind of team that if I could move Geno Smith, let's say Geno Smith gets cut by the Raiders, he's probably going to. He seems like the guy that if anybody would offer him a shot to start, he would be willing to go play there for $5 million. Vikings for $5 million. Like that feels like a guy you might be able to get, maybe not a good pick for, but something that could help you over here. Something that could give you a viable wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. And then you go and take that 106 and you just decide where you want to apply it. One thing I like about a team like this, if you could go get like Baker Mayfield, could you get Baker Mayfield for the 106 and maybe you tack on another one of these running backs like a Jalen Warren level? And the key with that is I now have Dart, Lawrence, Mayfield. I don't roster another backup. My quarterbacks are 3. And that's how I play it. I don't even play the any quarterback on a 2 deep game in this league because I know there's already 63 rostered. There's not going to be a lot of options available. Some teams, we may get one here in just a second. I'll move on to the next team. You'll see 10 backup quarterbacks available. If that's the case, then I know I can lean into that strategy a little bit more. So to finalize this one, what I'd probably do is try to find a QB3. My tight ends are fine. I know those are going to occupy my flexes. And then you just have to decide what's the most economical, receiver or running back. And it's probably going to be fixing the running back room and knowing that you have some receivers over here. Your receiver is going to be the weakest part of your team. You're banking on CeeDee Lamb and Nico Collins to literally fill 2.5 to 3 receiver spots every week. And then you're just using Trinity to play Flournoy or Coker or Calvin Ridley or whoever else you accumulate. But you're going to need probably 4, 5, 6 of those types to get it done, knowing that it's probably not in the cards for you to just go get another elite receiver. And I don't think you need one. You don't need to go get another Nico Collins to win on this team. Because really, you're just worried about these receiver spots. Again, these are your flexes. And these are just as good a flexes as going and trading for T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Marvin Harrison Jr. That type of receiver, that doesn't help you here, especially at the cost. Heck, maybe the tight end might be the option to go and swap out, Kittle for another guy if you could do that if you're not sure about him. You have some options on this team, though. So thank you for the submission. Let's go to team number 2. We got You Failed Me. Long-time member. Let's get to You Failed Me here. Need to find a better way to input the Dynasty Daddy without having to make everybody wait. So we got You Failed Me. This is a 12 by 10. Another 29-man roster spot for You Failed Me here. So go backwards. All right. This league is called Flex Mex. So let's go to Flex Mex here. So it's a 12 by 10 and 29 total roster spots. So we're looking right here, 12 by 10, 29 total roster spots. It is 4 minus 1, no premiums at all, 0. So 4 minus 1 for quarterback scoring. We'll scroll down here, see if there's anything that I'm missing. 4-1, so we'll look at the quarterback war in here just a second, but no bonuses, no premiums, nothing. So very, very vanilla. So let's get back up here. War Machine. I gotta figure out a way to get out of this. Okay, here we go. And I want to pull this up because this will highlight the difference between the non-tight end premium league. I'm sure people have looked at this before, but you'll see just how little tight end matters. And I want to highlight that because a lot of people play in leagues without a tight end premium. All right, so we'll go up here, look at the 3-year average war. Let's take a look at the tight end. Yeah, so here's the difference. In a non-tight end premium league, let's get rid of quarterbacks again. Non-tight end premium league, just look at these numbers for the receiver, or for the tight ends. Right when you get to the flex players, you're already down at 0.24, 0.23, 0.21, etc. And when you kind of go over to here, as you can see, the receiver war, it never gets to 0.2 until really you're down into like the wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 range. So what that tells me is that tight ends are just not flex viable at all. And I know with 29-man rosters, like I don't want to carry any excess value at tight end. So that's the first thing that stands out about this team. Here's what he says. A rebuilding team that got ahead of schedule and finished 4th after aggressive buying. Roster feels solid but lacks true elite hammers. I'm going to put this one in the chat so everybody can see. Boom. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that stands out about this team. Inefficient at tight end. Like, I only need 2 tight ends here. I could live with Jake Ferguson and Juwan Johnson. I could live with Jake Ferguson and A.J. Barner. I could live with Jake Ferguson and Gunnar Helm. I could live with Juwan Johnson and A.J. Barner. Like, any combination of these is fine. We need to cut at least 3 of these tight ends. Definitely, you want to get down to probably 2. But if you scroll down here to tight ends available on waivers, I mean, there's not many. But when I see like Darnell Washington on waivers, and then I'm rostering Jatavian Sanders or Colby Parkinson, there's just too many tight ends. We're just rostering too many tight ends. So, like with that, I got to fix it. I don't know what I can get anything for him. I don't know if I can trade Juwan Johnson for a third. A lot of times it's easier to trade these guys for running backs that fit your build better. We're already leaning into the NERB on a 53, but I'm serious. You failed me. I'm offering maybe A.J. Barner has a couple catches in the Super Bowl. Like I don't want picks. I don't want picks. I want Chris Rodriguez for A.J. Barner. And I know you already have Chris Rodriguez, but like that's the level of running back that I would take. Anything that can get me something during the season. And you're just more likely to get something from the running back position than you are a tight end in this format. It's like you're going to probably have to really grind to fix that. Or like Terrell says in the chat, just cut him. Just cut him. Because think about it. If you go down here and you see how many tight ends are being rostered, 53 tight ends are being rostered. That's an average of 4.5 tight ends per team. Knowing what I just said about the roster construction, every other team in this league is extremely inefficient with their rosters because they're rostering 4, 5, 6 tight ends. So by cutting them, you're actually getting a little value back because you are forcing somebody else to... Someone will claim Colby Parkinson. Somebody will claim Jatavian Sanders. Somebody will pick up Gunnar Helm. So just... I'm not saying go cut them right now. You probably have some work and you have nothing but time over the next month to try to do something else different with those guys. But go out there and just see what you can get. Another Isaiah Davis is better than one of those guys. Backup quarterbacks are better. Let's go to the quarterbacks here real quick. Because we know this is just a PPR league. So we know the receivers are going to be slightly better than the running backs in the flex, but not a ton. But the tight ends are irrelevant. So we're really looking at running back and receiver as pretty balanced here. But quarterbacks, you got a problem at quarterback. Let's go down and see what's available. I mean, Derek Carr's on waivers. That's an automatic pickup. Drew Lock's on waivers. That's an automatic pickup. This is the perfect build to start leaning into the backup QB strategy. I don't hate trading for some of those a little higher end backups. Can you get Will Levis? You know, can you get that? Can you get Will Levis for Jatavian Sanders or Gunnar Helm? I'd much rather have that than I would carry those extra tight ends. And that's a mundane trade that I can't see anybody in your league being like, why would somebody send that to me? They may not accept it, but it seems like a deal you could get done before there's any sort of buzz or hype about some of those quarterbacks maybe getting opportunities. So I'm building my backup quarterbacks here. I like Nix, I like Dak, but this is definitely the team, because of the diminished value with the tight end premium, this is definitely a team where I am rostering at least 6 backup QBs, maybe 7. Like, I can afford it here because just the premiums here don't matter. So those extra roster spots at tight end, and then we get to receiver, and we'll look at receiver in just a second. The extra roster spots can be allocated at quarterback. So Derek Carr, and then maybe you can shed a few of these guys for that. So let's look at the receivers, running backs, and picks. So we have 107, 109, 110. You already have an extra 28 first. I'm definitely moving at least one of these picks for a 28 first if I can get it. Sight unforeseen. I don't care if it's 107, 109, 110. If I could remove having to make at least one of these, maybe 2, I'm totally fine just storing that value in 28 firsts. I'd be fine doing, like, could I move the 1-9 and the 110 for a 28 first and a running back? Something like that. If you could get another quarterback, I don't hate that either. That's something I talked about with the last roster. If I can get a third quarterback, Baker's a great target, Goff's a great target, another Dak, another Nix, but I don't want to pay the dynasty price. That allows me to just not even have to roster the backup QBs. Like we already know down here, 66 quarterbacks rostered. I'm not going to be able to play the any quarterback on a 2-deep game easily. So unless I can trade tight ends for him, this might be a team where I'm just going 3 QBs. And that's something that's really popular for me right now, knowing that this any quarterback on a 2-deep, and you have teams that just hoard backup quarterbacks for the right reasons. Like I've talked about it for the last couple of years, why they do it. But they're harder to get into now. Teams aren't dropping guys like Carson Wentz or Gardner Minshew, and those guys are like fringe backups with their injuries last year. Like you can't go buy Joe Milton for a 4th because the person that probably has him is like, I don't value him with anything, but I'm not going to give him to you because I see the equity of having him on my team. So this is a classic go get a third QB, and what it does is it saves you having to allocate 6 roster spots on backups. So now you're at 2 roster spots at tight end, 3 quarterbacks. Guess what I have? 24 spots to just play in the streaming waters at the other positions. And you have a good enough team here with Tet, with Pickens, with Flowers, with Christian Watson, with Mike Evans, with Jaden Reed, with Jalen McMillan, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley. I mean, we're good at receiver. We're good at running back. Javonte, Etienne, Kyron, Tootin, Ramondre, Woody Marks, Kamani Vidal. This is a good team. This is a good team. If anything, this team is I can liquidate some of these guys, because if you trade Jalen McMillan on this team, if you trade Christian Watson on this team, if you trade Calvin Ridley on this team, if you trade Ramondre Stevenson on this team, like, it's not hurting you because you're only starting 10 anyway. You have too many mid players, but the way to get rid of mid players is not try to combine 4 of them for a stud. Like, sure, try that. But in any sharp league, someone's just going to laugh at you when you offer them 3 for 1. Instead, take Woody Marks and get a 27 second. Take Mike Evans and get a 27 second. Like, send out these offers. But the fact that you have literally, I would say, below Zay Flowers and below Javonte Williams, I have a cluster of like 15 guys I can just go sell. And I'm not selling to improve my lineup. I'm selling to improve my flexibility so I can improve my lineup down the road. That's why this team is so good. But you could also see this team where, man, you get to the start of the season and I have no clue how this team's going to perform because I have probably 15 to 16 deep in terms of decisions. It's too many decisions. Decisions in ranges where a lot of these players have value. I mean, right now, not a lot of players have market value. You have probably 15 players you could probably go get at least a 26 second for. And I know that's a 26 second. But there's just too many players. So you got to convert them to something flexible and gives you some time to buy so that you can go fix that later on when you need it. But pretty good team. Just some interesting things you have to do to try to shape it into some more flexibility going forward. So thank you for the submission. You failed me. Appreciate it. That was a good team to do because it was a really good team. Just had some issues that are not as obvious to fix. So number 3, we got Cheeky Hopson. So I'm going to pull up Cheeky's here. This is another 12 by 10. And I probably should add a category in here if we're doing best ball, because I know we have quite a few best ball teams here in DD. So another 12 by 10. This is the Flock Community 10. Shout out to Mason Dodd of Flock Community. Long time YouTuber. For those that don't remember, I actually started with Fantasy Flock back in 2018. And all those videos are gone. But myself and Mason probably did 50 videos on YouTube. Good times. He's really taken off since then, so I'll give him a shout out. But yeah, him and I did a lot of videos. I was the first other content creator ever to do videos on Fantasy Flock, for those that don't know that trivia. So let's go to this team, War Machine. Let's get Cheeky Hopson in there. Let's pull it up, 2026. Yeah, Aloha Panda. First one on, Ray was on it too. Ray was a little bit after me, but I'll never forget Ray and Mason did a show back in 2019 where they debated Tua Tagovailoa, who was coming out in 2020 against Kyler Murray. It's probably a 20, 30-minute show. Ray will remember it. I don't know if Ray's in here, but he'll remember it. But yeah, we were, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should have invested in Fantasy Flock when it was out there. But yeah, shout out to Mason. He's really cool to see what he's done with his channel. But anyway, back to the team. So this is Cheeky Hopson. This is a 12 by 10. It is 30 roster spots. We got some premiums here. So we'll go down and look at the premiums. But we got a 1.75 premium. It's 6 minus 2. And it's 2-point bonuses for 40-yard plays. So let's go down, take a look. It is start 1, 2 receiver. So it's only a 2-receiver league. So we'll look at the war in here just a second. 62 quarterbacks rostered, so probably not super viable to play any quarterback on a 2 deep. 6 minus 2. There's the tight end premium. 40-yard completions, 40-yard receptions. 40-yard completions is, I mean, I don't want to say that's a bigger deal, but obviously a quarterback that's completing 350 passes a year, like you're probably going to get a couple more points for that. So maybe it bumps the quarterbacks up a tiny bit, but not a ton. But let's go look at the war here. So one thing to check out here is with the quarterback scoring. So let's go to this, or no, with the 2 receivers. That's what I wanted to highlight. So it's only start 2 receivers. So this is a small change, but that flex range for receivers starts here. So it's not going to change the numbers, right? I think a lot of people look at, well, I can start 2 receivers, and we see this commonly referenced on the Discord. Well, I can start up to 5 because, yes, you can start 3 more in the flexes here. But you don't have to. So it makes that calculation of the tight end premium and the running backs a little more valid here because the scarcity for receivers is removed, right? So you see here, the numbers are the same as the first league we looked at, but they're not as important because the scarcity is going down just a little bit. You only have to start 2. So it makes that decision between, okay, do I need a tight end or do I need a receiver? You can probably get by with a few less receivers here, at least 1 or 2 lower than what the roster construction series would say, simply because you only have to start 2, because the viability is going to be the same when you get into wide receiver 3, 4, 5, 6. So looking at this roster, the first thing that I noticed, and here's what he says, back-to-back first-round buys in 23 and 24, missed the playoffs in 25, followed the roster construction principles, but league trade activity is low, okay? Owns all 27 picks, looking for a re-acceleration plan. So I like how you said re-acceleration plan. So let's just start with the quarterback room here. Hurts, Goff, Malik Willis, Aaron Rodgers. Given that it's a low-activity league, like, I'm probably still okay leaning into the just streaming my QB2 if I can get the backup quarterbacks that are close enough to the backup range that I feel comfortable with it. I don't know if Jake Browning gets into that range anymore. But you already have Trubisky, Rudolph, Mills. Because you have Rodgers and Willis, you're probably pretty efficient at quarterback. Now, if you wanted to move Goff, you could. Like Goff, Willis, and Rodgers, that is one of those quarterback rooms where if you're confident in Jalen Hurts as a locked-in top 6, top 8 QB, this is a troublesome QB room. And the reason is because Goff is probably going to be the guy you start every week. But if you actually look at, let's say Malik Willis, we're going to know if he signs to get a starter job, but let's say he does. You're probably going to start Goff 75% of the time because he's the most valuable quarterback. He feels the safest. He feels like he has the most proven track record. But it's probably going to end up being that he is only outscoring Willis and or Rodgers 30% of the time, 40% of the time. So you're probably just asking for a lot of variance and some missed war with this quarterback room. Instead, if I could convert Goff into another starter, maybe a running back on this team, I don't know what that looks like, but the key being, can I get Geno Smith back? Can I get Anthony Richardson back? Can I get another one of quarterbacks that are in this range? And I'll just live with it. Like, I don't value the long-term stability of Jared Goff. Some people do. But I would also argue that if you have Hurts, Goff, and a bunch of these guys, that you're just asking to have some inefficiency in your quarterback room. So I would lean, because I would bank on Hurts being a top 8 quarterback, I'd probably just lean on, hey, can I get another Malik Willis? Can I get another Aaron Rodgers? Can I get 4 or 5 of those guys? And just bet on that. And I don't know what you can get for Goff. Can I get a 27-second and another starter? Another running back. Can I get a 27-second and we don't have time on this. This is what a full roster review is for. We'll actually go through, find some players to try to search to buy. But can I get Chase Brown in a second for Goff? Maybe, maybe not. That's the type of deal that I would love if I could get it. But you probably need a quarterback needing team on the other side of that. So you might have to be a little flexible on the player you get back. But if I can get a leverage deal like that where I move Goff for another starter, I'd be fine doing that. We have the 105. That's probably locking us into a receiver in here if you want. Now, if we're looking at because the tight ends can be flexed at an equivalent value, remember I said the receivers are a little devalued here. Like, we're starting to get up to the saturation point. I think Fannon's top 5 tight end, Kincaid, top 10 tight end, Theo Johnson and Mason Taylor in a 175. I could squint and see both of those guys cracking the top 20. All 4 of these tight ends are rosterable. They're not clearly outside of the flex range. Now, Johnson and Mason Taylor are probably right on the edge. But if you told me, hey, I like those guys, they're young, they have a little value, I want to bank on them in the flex, fine. The key is those words I just said, though. You're banking on them in the flex. Now, they may not be flex-worthy every week, but you're banking on them by holding them at their current value. You're banking that they are going to be supposed to be in that flex range. So just bank on that, and then you adjust your receiver numbers down a little bit. Godwin, Shakir, Smitty, Igbuka, Jefferson, Puka. I mean, if you're drafting a receiver at 105, you're probably at that point right there. Luke McCaffrey, Nick Westbrook, Akeen can go. If you want to go best receiver available at 105, I'm fine. If you wanted to go Kenyon Sadiq because you don't like the wide receiver 3, I'd be fine. If you wanted to try to trade up to take a third quarterback, could you move 105 and Malik Willis for 102? Could try that. You could try it. I don't know if it gets done, but the key would be, again, what have I talked about with the first 2 rosters? You add a third QB to Goff and Hurts, and if it's Mendoza, that's fine. You don't have to bank on Mendoza for the first half of the year, but it allows you to get rid of these guys. Now, why I wouldn't do it so much with this team is the previous 2 teams, they didn't have kind of a quasi any quarterback on a 2-deep build already. This one does. Like, you know why I wouldn't do it here, Cheeky, is because you know what I have to do? I have to then go cut Davis Mills. I have to cut Mason. I don't want to cut Davis Mills or Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky. Other people may not value them, but I value them having them on my team in this current build. And it's hard for me to just go cut 5 backup quarterbacks. I hate doing that, especially if I know the ratios of how many I need to carry to be able to use them during the season. Running backs, I mean, you got a lot of clogging running backs, guys that probably are just interchangeable with other bodies that you could pick up. Let's look at running backs on waivers, not much. So, yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at maybe you make one trade, either add a couple extra roster spots by getting rid of these QBs, but I'd probably lean into just trying to get another 1 or 2 backup QBs. I'd be willing to go gross here. 105 can be flexible. Maybe you could trade it. Could you get James Cook for the 105? Could you put the 105 in a deal for Devon Achane? I mean, that's the type of trade I'd be willing to make on this team, because you are pretty shaky at the top of the running back room. You need to add 3 or 4 more usable running backs to this team, and you just don't really have the capital to do it. So you're going to need to split something, which makes me less willing to do that Malik Willis in the 1. You don't have enough assets to build out the running back room here if you're going to consolidate and get a third quarterback. So that's probably more of a luxury here. So that's what I would try to do, especially with low activity. Banking on trading, trying to find that sweet deal for one of the quarterbacks, probably not going to work. So you're going to have to maneuver this. You're going to have to grind waivers. And the places you're going to probably be able to grind waivers the best are the backup quarterback market and the running back market. The good thing is you have the 105. You have 2 good starting quarterbacks. And this core with Puka, J-Jets, Egbuka, Smitty, Shakir, Godwin, and these 4 tight ends, like, I feel pretty good about my tight ends and my flexes here. You just got to build out the running back room. That's going to be the thing, especially in a low activity league. Good luck. Good luck with that one, Cheeky. Thank you for the submission. All right, number 4, we got Dynasty Alex, known as Plank Crew. So I'm going to throw that submission up here. This is a 12 by 11, 31-man rosters, and it is like a perfect little mishmash of different formats, because this is actually going to be a point per carry. So I want to highlight the point per carry differences when you're highlighting that on the war here. So we'll pull up this league. This league's called the Front Office League, and it's 31-man rosters. So an extra roster spot or 2 compared to the ones we've looked at. And it's also a point per carry. And the first thing I look at when a point per carry is, do you understand the running back premium? And clearly, Plank Crew does, because we're rostering way more running backs than receivers. But I definitely want to highlight this one on the war, because it's pretty cool to see the difference when you get to the point per carry. So we'll go back here. So this is 0.75 tight end premium again. So the receiver versus tight end debate is going to be the same in terms of the flex rates. It's pretty even in a 1.75 premium, but it is 0.2 point per carry. So we're going to show this league and show the difference here, and it is this one. Okay. So let's make sure we know the number of starting receivers. Not a huge change, but we're looking at 3. Nope, 2 here. So another league with 2 receivers. So if you really think about receivers versus running backs versus tight ends, knowing that this is 1.75 and knowing that it is point per carry. So we'll get the quarterbacks off the screen. So the first thing you notice on the war, and this is what I call the war density, the running backs just score more points across the board because of the point per carry. The density overall in your lineup is higher for running back than really any position. But here it's comparable with quarterback. But against the receivers and the tight ends, like, this is where, if you hear me say running backs are strictly dominant, they are. Because running back 1, running back 2, and most of the flexes, running backs are the highest scoring position. So if you're comparing, like, which position do I prioritize in what ranges, then you have to look at the prices. But if you're just talking about most points scored in your lineup, the running backs are contributing way more production at both of these starting levels, RB1 and RB2, than any of the other starters. So that's the first thing to realize. The second thing, because this is a start 2 receiver league, you're comparing the running backs and the receivers here, right here. This is the first spot into the flex for both positions. Running backs, running backs, running backs, running backs, running backs, running backs, running backs. It starts to intersect here, but we also know the nature of running backs. The reason the running back war is lower down here is because it's total war on a 3-year rolling average. The RB 46 is not going to have positive war every week because there's not 46 running backs that are starting every week. There's usually only 30 to 40 in a given league. Across the NFL, if you just look at the receiver scoring versus running back scoring in a given week, there's not 70 relevant running backs every week. There are 70 receivers that are putting up 8 points, 7, 8, 9 points. Not start range, but there's just more of them. But we also know that running back 45 is only running back 45 for the season, but when you get to 2-week stretch where they are starting because there's an injury, they're probably up here. So think about that when you're roster construction. But what I highlight is I consider really any running back I can flex, like coming from this range, And running backs are still very viable in those flexes relative to the other positions. And the tight ends, we've already looked at 1.75 tight end premium. Here you go. These are your flex tight ends right here. Very comparable to the receivers. So you almost look at this as almost the perfect scoring league for true balance. The running backs are a little more dominant depending on the range that you get them in. So if I can get an extra top 40 running back and be able to flex them, I absolutely want to do that. But in terms of the three positions, it's very balanced in the flex. I think 0.15 is more like perfect balance. Here it tilts slightly to running backs, but it's close enough that you almost value those three positions equally. So what I do is I then go look at 69 quarterbacks rostered here. The first thing I look at here is knowing that we have 31 roster spots, and here's what Plank Crew says about his team. He says, tanked last season, secured the 101, moving off aging assets and added future extra capital, looking to flip from rebuild to contender in 2026 with the 101, 107, 111, 201, 301, and 2 extra firsts in 2027. So the first thing I look at here is knowing that we have 31 roster spots, knowing that these three positions are pretty much equal in terms of the flexes. How do I want to build the quarterback room? Dart, Dak, Willis. I'll tell you what, given that a few of these backup quarterbacks, I'm not sure Tyrod Taylor plays next year. I'm not sure Sam Howell's a backup. I think Rattler, Garoppolo, and Rudolph are, so if you want to hold those guys, fine. But I'd also be willing to go take Spencer Rattler, see if you can trade him to the Tyler Shuck manager for another running back like, I don't know, Isaiah Davis. I would take Isaiah Davis over Spencer Rattler on this build. Like, if I can beef up just another running back that I think could have a role, I would do that if I could get rid of Spencer Rattler, Jimmy G, Mason Rudolph. But I'm willing to trim down the quarterbacks here, given that I'm pretty convicted that Malik Willis is going to get a contract and he's going to get a starting job. Might not be long-term, but he's going to get one. So I'm going into this year, Dart, Dak, Willis. I don't need a fourth quarterback. So whatever you can do to get rid of these quarterbacks, that gives me 28 roster spots to play with over here. And I'm going to need every damn one of those roster spots. Scroll down. Let's see what's on waivers. Not much to pick up, honestly. Nothing to pick up, to be frank. Probably looking at... Oops, hold on. Make sure I didn't lose the screen here. No, we're good. You guys lose the screen? Hold on. Get it back. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. So back with this team, we've already kind of trimmed down betting on the three quarterbacks. So knowing that we have the 31-man rosters, like, I'm probably just trying to do what I can in the next 12 months to build up these spots. And I'm probably have to look a year out on a couple of these players, and I have to make some hard decisions, like Xavier Worthy, like Ricky Pearsall. Like, both of those players, and maybe even Marvin Harrison. Like, both of those players, along with Marv, like, if you're betting on them being flex-worthy and more going forward, then I'm okay pushing it out a year, because this team's not competing this year. But my roster construction potentially could get to a point where I'm maximized for efficiency this year. I just don't have the horses to actually get home and win the race this year. So the fact that we have 4 of the top 13 picks, tight ends, like, the good news here about the tight ends is we can get rid of Schoonmaker, Ertz, Jonnu Smith. I mean, last year I would have put him in that flex range, but not anymore. And so, like, you're only down to probably 2 tight ends I would roster. Maybe you hold Jonnu Smith because I don't really have anything else to keep. But Tutu Atwell can go. If we're down to 3 QBs, like, literally this one's simple for me. This team doesn't have the horses. I'm fine trading 111 and 201 and 301 if I want to split that and try to get 2 starters. But, like, this team probably just needs to go BPA. But also just keep in mind that you have somebody like Aaron Jones. You have somebody like Xavier Worthy or Ricky Pearsall. Like, I have to be honest about what those guys are, not for 2026, but 2027. I like the fact that I have the quarterback room built, which means I just have no pressure in this format with the point per carry format, with the tight end premium. Like, all I'm doing is just adding to this group. And because, especially if I can get multiple years out of Malik Willis, maybe if you wanted to, you could move one of these QBs like Malik if he does get a starting job and just know that I have to fix that QB3 going forward. But I like this type of build because I'm pretty confident about Dart and Dak for multiple years. And so I already have that quarterback stable set up to where, okay, I have my 3 quarterback build. I don't need to carry anymore. And I just know that with these future firsts and then any other picks that I acquire, that I'm literally just focusing on adding to this group. And I'd prefer to have extra roster spots during the season because what's more likely to be able to be traded in a league like this? It's probably the running back. You know, a guy like Devin Singletary, a guy like Isaiah Davis, like they're probably more valuable to trade for if you're a team looking to buy one of those guys than one of these tight ends or one of these receivers. So just keep that in mind. Like if the receivers and the tight ends don't hit the threshold, they're gone. They're off my team. That's why I'm like, man, I only have maybe 1 or 2 tight ends I'd want to keep, and then I only have 4 receivers. It's like I'm not worried about adding to those right now, and I'm just probably using every extra roster spot at running back if they're free pickups, if they're UDFA pickups, if they're guys that I pick up off waivers. So it's an interesting team. It's definitely a year away, but the team has a lot of potential, especially with the extra 27 first. If I can get myself in a position where I go into next year, let's say I have 3 firsts, 2 seconds, and then I have the shell of the team that I've already built out to where I only need to probably put in 4 or 5 starters. I have the ability, because I don't need a quarterback. Next year's class, even if it's a great quarterback class, I don't need one. But because I have an extra first, I mean, I don't know what you could get for Willis, but maybe there's a deal where you could turn Willis and the 111 into a 27 first, something like that. I don't know. But that's where I'd willing to be creative and just say going into next year, like I don't have to feel pressured to draft a 3rd quarterback, but just understand the numbers with the quarterback build here that you probably don't have the availability to build out any quarterback on a 2 deep because there was already, I think, 69 quarterbacks rostered. I mean, that's way too many to be able to lean into that strategy for cheaply. So thank you for the roster submission, Plank Crew. And then last one, we got Big Ted Red. This is team number 5. I'll throw it in the chat. So let's see. This is league name is The Best Offense is No Defense. So let's go up here and load this one in. This is a 12 by 10. So 12 by 10. It's 30-man rosters. And he put 4 IR, but that doesn't matter. 30-man rosters. Oh, doesn't look like it's rolled over for 2025 yet or 2026 yet. The best offense is no defense. It is PPR, 1.5 tight end premium. There is kick and punt return points, and then 4 point per passing touchdown. So we'll look at that. And then let's go over here and pop in the WAR. So no premiums other than the 1.5 tight end premium here. And then because it's not renewed yet, I'm going to have to put in 2025 to get it to display. So anybody using the WAR tool and your league doesn't show up, that's a common problem if the league isn't rolled over yet. Big Red Ted, get your commish to roll that league over, man. No excuse for a sleeper league not to be rolled over yet. You can roll it over like a day after the payouts are done. All right. So last one, and apologize to those I didn't get the teams up, but you can see like these are going to be good 45-minute shows when I go through these and do it the way that I want. So, all right. So this is a 1.5 premium. Actually, let's go to the WAR just to show the difference between the 1.5 premium. So get rid of the QBs. Okay. So as you can see here, here's where the starting tight ends live. Now, one thing that we didn't really talk about is I've talked about the density, just how many overall points do the tight ends contribute. It's not that high in a 1.5 premium. But the other thing is really looking at the position relative to itself, right? So this is true. It doesn't matter what you make the premium, whether this is 1.75, 2. I mean, I'm in a 2.25. This is 1.5. All that's really going to do, and we're actually working on something pretty cool. Ray and I are working on something pretty cool right now to kind of give the adjustments for tight end premium to be able to standardize it across any format. And if you just think about it, it's all relative. If you could picture what's the tight end's propensity to get their fantasy points from receptions. So just think of a tight end scores 200 PPR points, but they get 90 catches. So 90 of their 200 points are from receptions. That's 45%. So that's a bigger chunk if you add the tight end premium to that player. They're going to be helped more by the premium because their percentage points of scoring from receptions is higher. It's at 45% rather than a player that only got 70 catches. They're at 35%. So the premium is going to help those guys a little bit more. That's something that we're maybe looking to add or at least use to help adjust when you're looking at tight end Trinity, because that does matter. Like, usage is one thing, but when you're also just looking at that's what the premium impacts. The premium doesn't care whether you score touchdowns or doesn't care whether you have tons of yak or tons of air yards. The only way you're getting more points is actually with the receptions. That's a whole nother thing, though. I just wanted to highlight that for purposes of this conversation. But here, like, you can clearly look at these averages and figure out like where it starts to decline. Like right here, tight end 7, you can see a pretty big drop off there from tight end 5 to tight end 7, and then it really starts to flatten out. You're here at tight end 9 compared to tight end 15. And yeah, it seems like it's a big gap, but you're talking like 0.3 WAR for an entire season. That's not that much on a week-to-week basis. It's like 0.2 of a point per week. So it's not that big a gap if you're talking about just picking one of these guys on the right week, on the right matchup. So that's where you start to hear us say, well, tight end doesn't matter in this league. And that's because really the density of tight end doesn't matter relative to the other positions. Like when you start get down to this range, like this range right here, tight end 7, like that's where it really starts to matter in the flexes. But obviously tight end 7 is not fighting for the flexes against these positions. So that's the difference when you're in a 1.5 versus a 1.75. 1.75, if you remember, this line was higher. These tight ends here, these low-end tight end 1s and even the tight ends 2s were much more comparable with these positions in the flex range. So I just wanted to highlight that here. So back to this team. So it's 30-man rosters. Here's what he says about the team. It is a second-year Dynasty team, or he's a second-year Dynasty player who pivoted from a win now to a rebuild. Solid aging assets last season for draft capital, wants a higher-level framework for deploying picks and rebuilding efficiently. So it's definitely an interesting roster. Another Malik Willis team. Very few backups here. So we know we have 30 roster spots. Let's go down here and just make sure. Yeah, there's no backup quarterbacks available. You guys are noticing that, right? Every one of these leagues we've looked at has had at least 63 quarterbacks rostered. And I don't think we've looked at a league with more than 31 roster spots. So right there, if you just go 12, let's say on average 30-man rosters, 12 by 30, that's 360 players rostered. Almost every one of these leagues has had at least 15 to 20% of the players rostered in the league are quarterbacks. At least. I mean, we've seen a 63, a 69, a 66. This is 65. Like, this is consistent across leagues that are 12 by 11, 12 by 10, 12 by 12. But we don't have like 38 roster spots here. It's 30. And you still see an average of 5 to 6 quarterbacks per team. If that doesn't tell you that any quarterback on a 2-deep strategy has been widely adopted, like, I don't know what else does. So check your leagues. You see them every once in a while. There's only 50. You see where there will be 8 backup quarterbacks on waivers, and it might only be 26-man rosters or 27, but that should immediately be a red flag to go, man, I can actually lean into the backup quarterback strategy because they're available. What I don't want to do is pay to get the any quarterback on a 2-deep strategy. So just keep that in mind. This is, I think, all 5 we've looked at today. It's probably not super viable unless you're already there. Now, this team isn't already there. Only has Quinn Ewers and Tanner McKee. So, yes, we kind of have the third quarterback with Willis. We have 2 valuable backups. Maybe Quinn Ewers starts given the Dolphins cap situation. But, like, we're okay. You could maybe trade Quinn Ewers. Maybe you could get something for Quinn Ewers if it looks like Malik Willis is going to start. Hell, you might even get a quarterback room with Willis and Ewers both on the Dolphins. I don't know. But we're okay at quarterback here. I can live with 1 or 2. I don't have to get rid of them today. Even if Willis signs a 2-year contract and he's the locked and loaded starter for the Cardinals. Like, I don't have to get rid of Ewers and McKee. but I'm okay doing that. Can I swap them for literally any running back? Can I swap them for a tight end, etc.? So looking at this team, quarterbacks, we can probably thin this down to 3 if we know Willis signs, but otherwise we're probably looking at 4 or 5. That's fine. Tight ends, I mean, 1.5 premium. It matters so little that you probably have to decide between Jake, Tonjes, and Cade Otton. I like Cade Stover, but he's a cut on this team. Will Dissly, Thomas Fidone, they are gone. So we're cutting this down to 3. And that's the max. I would never roster more than 3 tight ends in this format unless they are locked in flexes. And that's a whole separate show that we can talk about. But let's say you could get another, just for instance, let's say we could get another Harold Fannin, or we could get another Tyler Warren. Like, what you start to do when you add another elite tight end, and when somebody says, oh man, I can trade for Colston Loveland in a 1-5, and you already have a guy like Gadsden. So let's just project Gadsden to be here. Tight end 8. Okay, that's kind of right at that top end of the range where I want to have my starter if I want to be competitive. But let's say I can get this guy. This is Colston Loveland, tight end 4. Now here's the reason why you'd be willing to do that. Is I can flex both of these guys, right? When you start comparing, let's say you get Loveland. He's your starter now. Now my tight end 8 is Gadsden. He's comparable to the flexes of these guys. Even in a 1-5, he's better than these guys. So you can flex him. There's still some dominance to be had when you can flex the tight end 8 against the wide receiver 35, wide receiver 39, wide receiver 30, whatever. He's better than those guys. But what you're doing when you acquire a second tight end that's within this threshold is you're actually changing this line. Like, we know right now, this line, if you just take this line and to the left of where my cursor is, those are the starters. That's what it looks like the starter distribution is for the league. But we also know that if you have 2 of those guys, it's changing that trajectory of that line for the other 11 teams. Let's say you get 3 of these guys. It's changing it even more. So that is why it is viable to like hoard top 8 tight ends or better in a 1-5. But it has to be within that threshold. It can't just be, oh, I have 3 of the top 15. That does you no good. Having tight end 12 here doesn't matter at all if you're flexing tight end 12. You're flexing tight end 12, you're not getting anything as an advantage in the flex. And you're probably not changing the tight end landscape all that much. Sure, you're removing tight end 12 out of this sample size, but that's not really impacting these guys who are pretty close relative to week-to-week game starting decision. So we don't calculate that, but there is value to be said, like, okay, I have Brock Bowers. I'm willing to go trade for Colston Loveland. And you'll hear in the chat, oh, it's a 1-5. I really don't want to pay for him. But what's not calculated in there is you're actually changing that line for the rest of the league when you make that trade. And you're satisfying one of those flexes with an advantage in the flex. So you can trade for extra tight ends in a 1-5. But there's just not many options that actually have that impact. Unless you're having impacts both ways, good flex, and impacting the tight end landscape, then I'm not really interested in doing it that much. Here, that's the problem we have. Cade Otton and Jake Tonjes, I could squint and see, okay, Kittle doesn't come back. Cade Otton, I actually think will get a decent contract, but like, let's say both those guys are top 20. They're not top 10. So they're probably just cloggers. I don't want to flex either of them in this format. Maybe I keep one for my backup, but neither of them are within that top 8, top 10. So they have to go. Dissly, Stover, Fidone, they can go. One of these guys ideally goes. I don't know how you make that work, but I'm fine with Gadsden. And then I'm fine with basically just keeping one of these 2. Or trying to find a deal that I can get rid of one of these 2. Now, unfortunately, with this team, I don't know what picks we have because the league isn't rolled over to 2026. But looking at the other positions, knowing we're going to go slim at tight end, we're going to be down to 2. Quarterback, we're probably looking at 4, 3, 4, 5. We have 23, 24 roster spots to play with. Scadaboo, Tootin, Corum, a bunch of bodies at running back. The clear inefficiency here is we have too many receivers. Way too many receivers. Now, I know this is an extra kick punt return point league. So there's maybe a little extra value for guys that are kick returners, but still way too many cloggers here. I mean, Robinson, Burks, Horn, Watkins, Restrepo, Palmer, Thornton, Mechie, all 8 of those guys are cuts automatically. And then if you want to bet on any of these guys, Coker, Pat Bryant, I'm okay betting on either of those guys. But just acknowledge, like, if they're not going to be in your lineup, which here they probably will be in your flexes because you really don't have the running back firepower or the tight end firepower to do it. But just keep in mind, when you start to make these picks, let's just say, for instance, you go into the draft and the best 3 players available when you're making your 3 rookie picks are receivers. And so, and I see in the chat, you went hard for backups in the first year. The tight end guy has Warren, Bowers, Pitts. Okay, Knox and Komet are useless. But man, yeah, Warren, Bowers, Pitts is exactly what I was talking about. 102, 105, 106. Thank you for clarifying in the chat. So here's my concern, Big Red Ted, is you are probably going to add at least 2 receivers. Like, you're probably angling for this to be, I don't know, what's your plan? You plan on going Mendoza at 102? Because I think if you did, I don't hate that. What that allows you to do is move Willis for something else, get rid of Ewers, and now you're set. Dart, Nix, Mendoza. I love that. Saves you roster spots down the road. Again, I've talked about it with every team leading into that 3 quarterback build where you can. So, yeah, you take Mendoza. Let's say you draft a receiver, and maybe you go with Kenyon Sadiq. But I don't love taking Sadiq because you're making a big bet that he is inside that top 8, inside that top 10. So just that 106 is the wild card pick. 105, you're probably just going best player available. What I would really love to do is somehow turn one of those picks into a running back. But here's the problem. You also have a bunch of seconds. You also have a bunch of thirds. Now you have a bunch of 27 picks. So you have a ton of ability to be creative here. So I'm not as worried about your running back room because you have tons and tons of options to just add bodies, right? Like, you could literally take all your seconds and all your thirds and build out a running back room. Now you may have to go trade a second plus for Blake Corum, Ramondre Stevenson, Shuba Hubbard, Tajay Spears. Like, you could get all those guys, Tony Pollard. You could build out a running back room today with all your picks. But what I just don't want to do, and here's my fear, is you already have Pittman, Pearsall, Coker, Bryant. And I'm not saying Bryant and Coker are equal to Pittman and Pearsall. But for all intents and purposes, through this roster construction, they are. They are all going to be in that flex range. So, like, by having Bryant and Coker on your team, you're not betting that, oh, I'm just going to hold them on my bench and see what happens. So my fear is, okay, you're drafting a receiver at 105. BPA at 106 may very well be another receiver. There's going to be a 4th receiver that goes in the first round. If it's, Denzel Boston to the 49ers or something, you're like, damn, I really want to take that guy too. All of a sudden, you've now relegated Pearsall and Coker to wide receiver 7 and 8. And now you have too many receivers. Now you have a bunch of seconds, which means any receiver you add in the second or the third is just another Jalen Coker, another Pat Bryant. Like, you're getting into roster clogger hell very quickly. So the good news with this team is you have a ton of assets. I mean, look at all these assets. 3 firsts next year, 3 seconds next year, 3 thirds next year. I mean, you're already set with 27 picks. And you have high 26 picks. So how can I convert some of this to even 2028 value? How do I convert some of these seconds and thirds into value that builds up to get another Blake Corum, to get another Tootin, to get another? I mean, how do I just build out the team? Because this team can win next year. There's no doubt. But I don't want to add 12 players in this year's draft because it's literally just diminishing returns. Even some of your running backs, man. Like, I don't want to draft the RB4 in the class to cut Trevor Etienne. Doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to be really creative. And I see the question, and before we wrap up, what do you do when you have all the picks but the league doesn't value them? You have to be creative. You have to understand that the league may not value the picks at what your vision of the value of picks should be. You may think there's no way I'm trading the 203 for a 28 second. But the value to you is not the 203 is higher than the 28 second. It's that I don't have to buy into a diminishing returns asset by drafting the wide receiver 9 to then kick Pat Bryant off my roster. That's essentially what you're doing. So think about it that way. Like, the good thing with this team is you have a lot of roster spots to clear. You have 8 clogger receivers, 3 clogger tight ends. That's 11 spots right there that are just straight cuts. So you have room to make all the picks. But just understand that there's a value to just having some extra roster spots to pick up guys off waivers, to pick up guys that come across the waiver wire throughout the season. Like, I don't need to make all those picks. But because you're already so saturated with 27, really just pick your spots. Like, you need to build out your construction to have a chance to compete this year. You need another Tootin. You need another Blake Corum. You might need a Tony Pollard. Like, you don't need stud running backs. It'd be nice to have an anchor. Maybe you try to take that 102. What is it going to take for me to get the 101? 106 and 102 for the 101 in a 27-second. Can I do that? It's an expensive price, but you're addressing the biggest need by adding Jeremiah Love to the team. So I'm fine doing that. You just need to find a way to consolidate. And it's not consolidate because you don't have enough open roster spots. It's consolidate because I don't want to have to add 12 players through the draft and then go, well, cool, I added my 12 players. Now I have 0 roster spots unless I'm drafting the guy that I drafted in the 3rd to pick up somebody off waivers. So kick some of that value to 28. If people don't value the 26s and they overvalue the 27s, kick them to 28. That would be my solution to that problem. So that is it. That is Roster Rescue episode number 1. I'm going to do these hopefully once a week. Maybe try to get 3 out a month if I can't do them every week, but I'm going to pick 5 rosters from the Discord. If you're not already in the community, get in the community, jump in, submit your rosters. I'm probably going to call the thread out much earlier or much later in the week instead of a day before, because I put it out there and there was like 45 submissions. So if I didn't get to yours, maybe I'll jump in sometime this week and record another episode. As I get more comfortable with, the screen sharing and the audio and all that stuff, it'll be a lot easier to knock these out and getting 5 of your teams done. But they're probably going to be a good 45 minutes just because of the way that I like to talk. But if you want a formal roster review, you can get one through the website, ddfantasyfootball.com. You get 40 minutes. I go through a lot of what I did today, but we'll definitely go through each individual team, look for trades, that kind of stuff. So go through it. Hopefully this helped you look through your rosters through a different lens, using the war, using roster construction, etc. I see Ruben in the chat giving me gruff. Yep, a Scott 45 minutes is usually 75. Probably going to end up going a little bit shorter here, right around an hour once I cut out some of the stuff that we had some technical difficulties on. But either way, jump in the community, website, Patreon, patreon.com/allgas. A couple extra perks over with Patreon. It's different than the site, but you still get access to the Discord where I'll do these on the stages. So with that, we're done for this episode. Thank you for everybody that submitted their rosters, and we'll get you on episode 2. Thanks.